What's up everyone, it's Carrie aka Nerdygirlcreates. Welcome back to my channel. I know, I'm not camera ready, so that's why you don't see me on the screen. But this is kind of a spur of the moment type video. It's something I wanted to talk about, and I wanted to do it while I had all my thoughts organized. However, because this is spur of the moment, I might ramble, so I apologize in advance. This isn't the type of topic I have covered lately on my channel. Usually I don't like to focus on this kind of like negative outrage that Twitter seems to constantly be spewing out on a regular basis, but I did want to talk about this in a sense of respect of characters, okay? I have been a long-time comic book fan. I am not full-on, memorizing dates or any other details like that. So I'm not like the ultimate comic book fan, but I have grown up with comic books, specifically certain characters, and I have a lot of respect for those characters. And I feel like there's this need lately to kind of like just bash on certain characters because of what they represent, or because it's just trendy to do it. I'm not sure. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, recently on Twitter I saw this tweet from somebody who was claiming that Superman is an incel. Yes, you heard it here. Superman apparently is an incel because he's a huge dork, he doesn't have chemistry with anyone, and he's technically an alien. Now, it's obvious to me this person doesn't really know that much about Superman, except for maybe out of what he saw and he or she saw in comics or something else. Who knows? But Superman is not an incel. And I think characters like Superman and Captain America seem to be getting the worst of this type of like negative response. I mean, I could say I don't know why, but I think it's obvious why. Superman and Captain America are both like old school characters. They're back from the late 30s, 40s. And they were designed around the time they came from. Superman in particular is the small town farm boy who, yes, he's an alien from another planet, but he knows more of his life here on Earth than he does of Krypton. He was raised by a loving farm family, Pa Kent and Ma Kent. He's got old-fashioned values, which nowadays seem to be very frowned upon. But he grew up in that small environment, and as somebody who grew up in a small town, I kind of understand it. I mean, I think sometimes I still get looked at like I'm naive about things, but in a small town, you have the people you know. The people from the day you're born, as you grow up. There's not too many instances of anything that challenges that on the outside. When you end up leaving that and going to, say, a bigger city like Clark does when he goes to Metropolis, it's a culture shock because now you're dealing with a whole wide range of different types of people, different types of backgrounds. So you're kind of like flabbergasted. You don't know like how to communicate. You might say something that somebody might misinterpret. And being as shy as I was then, it didn't help. So I could see why Clark going into Metropolis can seem a little dorky. It's mainly because he has only known one life. He's only known one town and one group of people. So to be thrown into this scenario with a huge city where not everybody knows each other. There's different types of culture, there's different types of even languages, because if you've ever been in like a city like New York City or Miami, you're going to come across different languages too. So you're kind of like, you feel really out of place. But I don't think that means you're an incel. Because as time goes on, Clark does adapt to his environment. He does make bonds and friendship, which I find hilarious that this person would insinuate that he doesn't. He obviously starts a romance with Lois Lane, who is somebody who has had a life that's been the complete opposite of what Clark's has been. You know, she was growing up in a military family. She's been all over the place. She has no fear of adventure or going into a different type of country and adapting to the surroundings. He's also made friends with Jimmy Olsen. He's also made friends with Bruce Wayne, who is somebody who, despite their differences, in some weird way, they have a lot of similarities, and it's not just the superhero stuff. I'm talking about, they know what it feels like to be different, because Bruce has had to play a whole act his life as the playboy billionaire, where in truth, he felt like an outsider from everyone because of the tragedy he went through. So Clark kind of understands that, being not only an alien, but somebody who grew up in a small town and now is trying to adapt to the rest of the world. So that friendship in many ways makes sense. Yes, they're very different in a lot of ways, but I think that one similarity is one of the things I believe pulls them together. I also think the other problem that people have with Superman, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier on in the video, is that he is very old-fashioned, is how they see it. He's got small-town values. He probably has some type of, like, religious background. It's never really, I don't think it's ever really been stated, but usually in small towns, people are usually very involved with either a church or whatever it is that is the dominating religion in their town. So he does have, like, those values of faith. I wouldn't say I'm very religious. I mean, I was raised in a Catholic church, but I've not really practiced. But I see how the church in a small town was very important because people would gather there. It was a social event. It wasn't just going in for worship, because afterwards there was always, like, a gathering, either like a breakfast or a coffee time. Somebody was responsible for bringing the donuts and all. So it was a community event. Every Sunday, everybody got together to church to worship and then hang out afterwards and catch up. They might go to, in my case, my little town was mostly Irish, and there was an Irish pub near the church, so people would go right over there to have breakfast, or if the weather was bad, down in the basement, they'd hold donuts and coffee. They would have flea markets, auctions, different types of fundraisers, bingo, which is the most popular thing, but they had different things for the community, and it was always centered at the church. A lot of people nowadays, there's many out there who are very vocal about religion being toxic, and I am not going to bash religion on this channel, nor am I going to say it is great, but I think it depends on the person, and I think it depends on how it affects them. Moving aside from that, Superman, like Captain America, is also very patriotic. Captain America, you know, his family were immigrants from Ireland. He didn't grow up in the best area of Brooklyn. If you're from New York, you knew a little bit about the history, especially if you're from an Irish background. There was a lot of struggling for the Irish in New York, especially, like, if you were Catholic. But he overcame it. He overcame bullying. Superman has a lot of respect for the planet and specifically the country that took him in and raised him. He was taught to, you know, stand up for the country, be proud of the country. But I think people also overlook that he is not afraid to also call out when something is wrong within the country. You know, if there is a politician like Lex Luthor running for president, yeah, he's going to stand against that. He also tries his best to play within the rules of the government. There are times, though, he will go Batman, but most of the time he wants to respect the law. He wants to respect the rules that are set in place by humanity. But I think people see patriotism as, like, a bad thing because they tie it so much into the past. And I think people don't realize, like, at that time, as much as I'm against what happened back then, that was the norm. But we have grown since then and have developed since then, and I think Superman has in many ways too. Now, I'm not for Zack Snyder's emo Superman, even though I love Henry Cavill. I prefer more the optimistic, he sees the good in all, he wants to fight for what's right. That's the Superman I knew growing up. I mean, being a kid in the 80s, everybody watched the Christopher Reeve Superman movies. I mean, and just to state, Superman's not my favorite character, but I wanted to do this because I kind of feel like he's constantly the target of, like, a hate campaign. Like, even when it comes to the writing in a lot of the comics, and I haven't read too many of the newer Superman comics. If I was going to say there was one I am reading, and it's probably a better version of Superman, it's The World's Finest by Mark Waid. They don't seem to know how to write him, because there's this issue with, oh, we don't want to upset the Twitter mob by making him too patriotic, too much of a leader. Because he does have a leadership quality to him, and I think people get bothered by that. So there's always, like, this inability to kind of, like, write the qualities that make Superman Superman anymore. Because people are afraid to offend. Or the people writing it don't like Superman. Outside of Mark Waid. Because Mark Waid so far has done a good job. People forget Superman also has a very strong relationship with Wonder Woman. Now, Wonder Woman is the embodiment of female empowerment. I'm not going to get into that other crap that's going on right now, but she's a strong woman who believes in fighting for equality, fighting for the rights of people, whether it be man or woman. She is very strong. She's a princess. She's a leader. But her and Superman bond, and he respects her for that strength that people tend to think he is against. You also forget that Lois Lane is a very strong character herself. And this is a character who, when she was created, you didn't have women in journalism. A lot of women then there weren't too many professional jobs outside of being a secretary and, you know, some type of office worker that women went into, because it was kind of frowned upon. My grandmother was one of those women who went into, like, a management position at a store, and she dealt with a lot of, like, crap from people for it. Because at that time, you were expected to be at home taking care of the kids. But Lois Lane was ahead of her time, just like Wonder Woman was then. I mean, Lois Lane is a reporter. She's out there. She's very brave. She's not afraid to put herself in danger to get the story. Some people might see her as arrogant or obnoxious. I don't. Again, it also depends on the portrayal and the writing. But I think she is a very good character, a very good female role model. So there isn't anything there you can point out with Superman as being, like, sexist. Unless you're going to go back to those comics in 1938. I'm sure you could find something back. But again, people have to remember the time and what was acceptable during that time. And that's, I think, the biggest issue I have. Is people are constantly saying, well, he's this. And then they'll point out something from 100 years ago. And you're like, well, you know, during that time, he doesn't act like that anymore. It's the same with Captain America. You can go look at Captain America comic books back in the 40s. There's things he did that would not be acceptable now, but back then were. I just don't understand this absolute hatred of characters like Superman. I hear old-fashioned, he's not modernized, which I disagree with, because I think in a lot of ways he has grown with the times, but I think he's still held on to those values. However, the other point that I would like to make is, and I'm going to quote Agent Coulson from the first Avenger movie, when Captain America, Steve Rogers, looks at him and says, don't you think it's a little too old-fashioned when referencing the new Captain America costume? And Coulson turns and looks at him and says, I think what everybody needs right now is a little old-fashioned. And I think in this time, especially what's going on right now, you've got wars on social media over the dumbest crap. You have such a big divide in the country, whether it's politics, race, or whatever. A character like Superman, I think, is even more perfect for now than ever before. Sorry. Why? Because he is optimistic. Because he believes in the good in people. He doesn't judge people on race, gender, sexuality. His son is now bisexual. He has no problem with that. But at the same point, I think he holds on to certain values that are slipping away here. And I'm not talking religious. I'm talking about unity. I'm talking about bringing us together for a common cause. And Superman has always tried to do that. He's tried to pull people together. He'd rather negotiate and have a conversation before beating the shit out of you, okay? He's not Batman. Batman will do that. He wants to see people happy. He wants people to get along. And again, that goes back to that small town mentality, which is not a bad thing. I mean, Superman sees everybody as his family. You know, we're all from the same community, no matter how big the planet is. And we should work together, you know, to make this the best place possible. And I feel like that's not happening a lot in the world today. People are so judgmental on things that I find like crazy. I mean, we go to war over characters. I mean, I'm making this video because of multiple tweets about Superman that have been happening over a period of time. It's insane, and I don't know why people are so hell-bent on hating on Superman. You've got people fighting over video games, like, oh, well, it's too difficult for us. We need an easy mode, and the rest of you are just gonna have to deal with it. Like, it's stupid what we're going to battle over. I see people screaming in people's faces because they don't like the fact that they have a different outlook on life. I mean, that's why I think Superman is perfect for now. And you might think that's crazy, but in all reality, we need that beacon of light. We need that character who's going to urge everybody to work out their differences and do their best to get along, to understand where the other person is coming from. And it's not about his race, it's not about any of that crap. It's about what he stands for. Because I know there's going to be people going, oh, what we need is another, like, male mansplaining to everyone. He doesn't mansplain. He's respectful. And again, that's that small town background. He's respectful. He's also not going to tolerate watching people get hurt. And I think if somebody could just write him in that way outside of Mark Waid, that really shows and reminds people why Superman was created in the first place. Why Superman is as iconic as he is. Maybe people might open up a little more and try to, like, understand the character. It's hard nowadays because nobody wants to see anybody's side of anything anymore. But I think, like, that, and I'm rambling, but I think that is why he's important for now. I think he's more important than ever. And instead of just, like, randomly spewing out this stuff just to start toxic battles on Twitter or social media in general, why don't you do research on the character? Why doesn't DC write the character in a way that upholds his standards, upholds his beliefs, but also, you know, respects the present atmosphere? Again, Superman is not an incel. Superman is not this character that is toxic. Superman is the opposite of toxicity. Superman is, again, the one who believes in the good in everybody. And that's all I wanted to say. So, please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment down below, let me know what you think, and I will see you on the next video. Bye!